So something to get excited about as the Rams head into their second preseason game of the year. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Travis Rogers. Thanks for checking us out and making a part of what you do. Make sure you click that subscribe button in your podcast feed. Also, subscribe to our Locked On Rams YouTube channel as well. That's a good way to get involved with the pod. When maybe you got something else, you don't have your phone or doesn't, put it on the laptop and go check it out through Locked On Rams on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter as well. Not only do I host this podcast, but I also host the Rams pre-half and post-game show on their flagship station, ESPN 710. So I will start the pregame coverage coming up on Friday against the Houston Texans. That'll be done at 5 o'clock on the West Coast. If you want to check that out, you can check it out on the ESPN LA app as well if you want to do it that way. So here's what I want to get into on today's pod. I want to talk about some players who probably need to play pretty well on Friday if they want to have any chance at all of making the regular roster for this Rams squad. That's coming up in just a little bit. Got a little chippy at the inter-squad game the other day. Peter King wrote something pretty interesting about that. We will discuss that as well. But let's start right here. A little bit of, at least for me, it was a surprise, especially after what we saw last week. John Wolford is going to play against the Houston Texans. John Wolford did not play in the first game of the season against the Chargers. John Wolford got a ton of reps in training camp because Matthew Stafford's arm wasn't quite right, so they wanted to make sure that he was staying healthy. So John Wolford got to run a lot with the number ones at practice over the last couple of weeks, which is good news. In the event that he needs to go play, he'd have a few at least, quasi game speed reps. Now he's going to get some game speed reps, maybe not regular season speed, but they are game reps. There will be guys trying to hit him. There will be guys trying to intercept the ball. There will be guys attempting very aggressively to cover his wide receivers in that game. Now, the Houston Texans are not expected to be a good team, but it's NFL football, and we'll see what that means. Now, the most interesting part to me is why? Why did they change their mind from, he's going to be a big part of what we do, to let's not play him, to, let's put him in for half the game against the Houston Texans. He's going to quarterback the first half, and Bryce Perkins is going to quarterback the second half. Now, we talked about this on the pod yesterday. Luis Perez was released recently. He was part of the cut down that they had the other day, so he's no longer here. So the Rams are basically down to three quarterbacks at this point. Matthew Stafford is not going to step foot on the field during the preseason. So you're basically down to two guys to get over the course of the next two games. It could simply just be that they're down to two guys. But I think there are three more realistic possibilities. Two of them are kind of the same. And then the third one, which I think is by far the most interesting one, is the one I want to spend a little time discussing. The first one is they're going to need him to play sooner than later, that they've been a little cagey about the health of his arm. And I'm speculating here, right? I know I don't have any inside information on this. This is just pure speculation. But that maybe Matthew Stafford is going to need some time to get ready. Maybe Matthew Stafford is not as healthy as we're being led to believe. And there is a better than average chance that John Wolford's going to have to play in one of these games. And Sean McVay's saying, we need to get him against someone. John Wolford has not seen live action football since week 7 to, I guess, the playoff game against the Seattle Seahawks 2 years ago. Okay, and he only played very briefly before he got hurt. He's only really played one NFL game, from start to finish. He's not green in the sense that he hasn't been around for a while. He's green in the sense that he hasn't played at all. So maybe it's that, hey, listen, we may need him, and we may need him sooner than later. We need to get him some game time action that we can have scrimmages, we can have, practice, but it's not quite the same as going up another guy. Send him out there and let's see what it was. That could be what it was. Almost the exact opposite thing could be true as well, and that's a reason to do it. That Matthew Stafford's 100% healthy, that they know that he's good to go, that they're not worried about his arm at all, and they're thinking, look, this week and then next week against Cincinnati Bengals, this may be our only opportunity to really put him in a game and get him against live competition because Stafford is healthy. And the last thing we need is to go through, a bunch of weeks and have him not play at all. And then all of a sudden you need to call him because of, who knows what, knocking on wood, hopefully it doesn't happen. But that could be it too. So those are the first two reasons. And both of those, make pretty good sense. Here's the thing that I find the most interesting. Bryce Perkins was carried on the roster last year, right? Third string quarterback Bryce Perkins, because the Rams were afraid somebody's going to scoop him up if they put him on the practice squad. And I think that concern was probably pretty valid. They are almost certainly not going to carry three quarterbacks this year, right? Very few NFL teams do. I mean, it's possible, but it's very unlikely. He looked really good against the Chargers. We have not seen John Wolford for a long time. And look, if you almost regardless of what you do for a living, I would imagine that you've had the following moment in there when you're with the people that make decisions. And maybe you're one of the people that does make that decision. And you're sitting there and you have that moment where, am I sure I'm doing this right? And let's go around the room. And the question could be, and again, let me be crystal clear with this. I'm speculating. I do not know. Could it be as simple as, hey, are we 100% sure that John Wolford's better than Bryce Perkins? Are we sure that that's the right order of things right here? Let's go around, because here's what it is. John Wolford can move his feet a little bit. John Wolford has played in an NFL game, and he did okay. And Sean McVay has said that he has the confidence in putting Wolford out there in a real game situation. Okay. Bryce Perkins looked pretty good in that preseason game. Bryce Perkins looked really good in preseason last year. He doesn't have the big eyes. He doesn't get nervous. He doesn't seem to be rattled all that much. And I understand the defense isn't scheming. The players that he's going up against are not, starting NFL caliber for the most part. I understand that there's some variables here. I'm well aware. But tell me I'm not crazy in a world where if you watch John Wolford and Bryce Perkins go out there on Friday evening, 7:00 kickoff, and those two guys are going up against the same team, against relatively the same amount of competition, and Bryce Perkins doesn't look better. Tell me that that's not possible. And tell me that that doesn't make you start to think, look, maybe we have a guy. Maybe, it's happened before, right? Where you have a guy on your team that's kind of not part of what you're doing. You have him around, you have him in camp, he impresses you a little bit. Yeah, let's keep him around and run some practice squad, things like that. And then the next thing you know, like, wait, hold on a second. Is this guy good? Could he actually be a part of our team moving forward? Doesn't it feel like that could be a possibility? What if John Wolford goes out there and looks really bad? What if he throws a couple interceptions? What if he looks like he's not quite up to the game speed? What if it just doesn't look good? And then Bryce Perkins goes out there and puts up another performance like he did against the Chargers. Are we not having a different conversation come Monday morning on Locked on Rams? Having that, hey, are we sure that John Wolford's the number 2 guy? I'm not saying that's why they're putting both of those guys out there. I'm saying that's might be one of the reasons why they're putting those guys out there. So certainly something to watch right there. Do not worry about the Rams being complacent heading into their Super Bowl title defense. That's coming up next on Locked on Rams. All right, as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small businesses fire on all cylinder. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Let's talk about this, right? How often have you needed somebody, you're not quite sure where to go or where to find the right people or where to post this job or whatever it may be? It can be challenging to find that right person. So create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. That's a lot of people. Then add your job and the purple #hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Again, that's a lot of people. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Thanks for making Locked on Rams your first listen every day. However you play, get the latest NFL fantasy draft tips from Locked on Fantasy Football and Locked on Dynasty. Plus, starting August 22nd, we're bringing you daily top 10 lists for Fantasy Draft Week. Locked on Fantasy Football and Locked on Dynasty. Available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So fights, scuffles, skirmishes, brouhahas, Donnybrooks, whatever you want to call it, are not uncommon at football practice, right? Guys are doing a drill. One guy goes a little bit harder than the other guys think he should, or one guy does something maybe he thinks is a little underhanded or whatnot. And then teammates that have known each other for a long time and are probably pretty friendly most of the time, all of a sudden it gets pretty intense and maybe guys start chirping and then somebody hits somebody and you got to fight. Okay, so this is, I'm sure, what happened between Aaron Donald and Rob Havenstein. Donald ended up ripping off Rob Havenstein's helmet and throwing it at one point, and it calmed down pretty quickly. Sean McVay jumped in there, and every single coach, NFL coach or otherwise, likes it when their guys start getting pretty salty along the way. But I thought this was really interesting. Peter King was talking about that little scuffle along the way, and this is what he said. This team is very chippy when they practice. This team takes practice very seriously. Case in point. First team offense against the first team defense. Aaron Donald, for part of the practice, as Coach Sean McVay told me, was wrecking practice. Let me stop right there. We've heard that before, that Donald is so impossible to deal with that you can't do any work because he keeps blowing up all the plays. Okay, let me pick it back up with Peter King. At one point, there's a little scuffle. It's Aaron Donald versus the offensive line versus Rob Havenstein. At one point, Donald rips off Havenstein's helmet and just throws it, and McVay runs in there. The whole thing is stopped. But I just looked at that, and I just said, we're in the middle of August, and this team's practicing like they're playing the Chargers this weekend in a real game, or they're playing somebody in a real game. I just think that, to me, it's a good sign. This is not a team that wins a Super Bowl, goes through the motions of practice the next year. This is a team that realizes that if we're out here practicing, let's practice. That is exactly what you would like to hear, right? That is exactly what you're hoping to hear from the Rams players this season, that it is business time again, that it is time to get serious. And I think people understand this. I believe that there's a misconception that after you win the Super Bowl, everybody's like, oh, cool, we don't have to do anything anymore. And everybody shows up fat and everybody shows up lazy and I don't need to go to the gym. We won the Super Bowl last year. It's never that, right? It's never that obvious that guys have started to phone things in. But what it is just a little bit of, I know how to do this. Right. I know when it comes time to do it correctly, I'll be able to do it correctly. I don't have to go as hard as I can in this drill. And it's not even a conscious decision. It's more of a subconscious decision. Well, that's not going to work if Aaron Donald's lined up on the other side of you, because Aaron Donald does not have that gear. And all of a sudden, if guys are getting chippy and pushing and shoving and throwing helmets and ripping helmets off, it's going to get pretty serious pretty quickly. And I think that's exactly what happened. And everybody that's at that camp, I told you when I was out there a couple of weeks ago that everybody was on the same page. They were singing from the same songbook, which was, yeah, last year is last year. Let's get back to work. And it didn't feel like lip service. I've been around other teams that have won championships that when they say, oh, no, we're going to go at it like we're coming in it and we haven't been to the play. Yeah, okay, I'm not buying it. You're just saying it because that's what you're supposed to say. I'm buying it with the Rams. I believe that they are taking this serious in a way that is above and beyond the normal title defense. I believe that Sean McVay is wired differently. I believe that Aaron Donald is wired differently. I believe that that Matthew Stafford is that good of a player. I believe that they all have a certain sense of, oh, you think that we just kind of caught lightning in a bottle? You think that our, F them picks strategy is just something that we got lucky? Okay, all right, well, watch this coming again. Peter King's been around the NFL for a long time. He's seen a lot of coaches. He's seen a lot of teams. He's seen defending champions every single year for decades. If he says that he sees an intensity that's not typical of a Super Bowl champion, I believe him. I believe what he says in that regard, having seen it with my own eyes, having talked to some of the players, having talked to Les Snead, having talked to Sean McVay. I believe that this is how they're going to come and approach this season, that it's going to be very different than what happens a lot of times when a team wins a title. I like the chippiness. I like that Sean McVay needs to get in there. I like that Aaron Donald wrecks practice. I like that these guys want to punch each other in the head because it means when we get to September 8th against the Buffalo Bills, they're going to want to punch the Buffalo Bills in the head, which is good news. This is not let's ease into it. This is not, hey, this is a long 17-game, 18-week season. If we're really lucky, we have 3 playoff games. If we're maybe slightly less lucky, it's 4. But we're going to be playing, football every week, more or less, for the next 5 months. Let's not leave it out here on the practice field. It doesn't feel like that's something that they're all that concerned about, that they're going to hit the ground running full speed ahead. And I love it. You can tell this kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week. It's another good example of why you need to subscribe to Locked On Rams. You need to bring it to play for the Rams. It is so buttoned up. Even in the preseason, they don't get penalties. They're not jumping. And when it's sloppy, McVay doesn't tolerate it. He calls guys out, he fixes it, and they move on from it. And if you can't move on from it and you can't get it fixed, guess what? You don't play. You don't last on the Rams very long if you're the guy that can't find that lane of we're going to take care of our business every single time we get out here. Love that story from Peter King. All right, coming up next, I want to talk about some of the players on Friday afternoon, Friday evening against the Texans that better put together some decent performances if they want to be on that Rams roster by the time we get to that game against Buffalo. That's coming up next. So you're hanging out with some friends and you're putting back a few drinks, and a few becomes a few too many, right? As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think for calling about a ride. And you say, nah, I live pretty close. I can make it home. It's not that big of a deal. What are the odds that you're going to get pulled over? And even so, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, your insurance goes up. You lose your license. You lose your job. You total your car. You kill somebody. Everybody knows about the risks of drunk driving. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, it doesn't stop everybody from getting behind the wheel after they've had a few drinks and they're under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers and are on the roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a couple of drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, so let's talk about three players for the Rams who better step up and have some pretty impactful performances starting tomorrow against the Houston Texans. Let's start at the wide receiver position. We spent a lot of time talking about this. The Rams are loaded up at this position, right? We know who the three starters are. You know that you've got Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, obviously Van Jefferson when he's healthy. Those are your starting three. You know that Skoronek's on the team, right? So that makes four. You know that Tutu Atwell is on the team. That makes five. You've got all of a sudden, you've got Brandon Powell. Let's start right there. He's your kick returner / punt returner. He's also a wide receiver. That makes six. Now, all of a sudden, you've had a guy like Lance McCutcheon who had a couple of touchdowns in that first game. And that is your maybe seventh wide receiver, depending on how he does on special teams. But let's talk about Jacob Harris, another wide receiver on this team who did not play in the first game against the Chargers. He was nursing a groin injury. He is expected to play against the Texans. He did practice this week. He did participate in the scrimmage. He needs to go out there and put something together because Jacob Harris is not a guy that's front of mind, front and center. And as good as Sean McVay and Les Snead and everybody are at their jobs, they're human beings. And the last thing that you see a lot of times, and whether you're healthy, unhealthy, whether you have a big game or a bad game, if there's one spot available, I'm not so sure that McCutcheon doesn't have the inside edge. And I'm not just talking about Harris going out there and making some catches and maybe getting in the end zone, picking up a couple of first downs or whatever it may be. You better go out there and find a way to make an impact on special teams because that may be the way that you get on this roster. Not because you can run a route, not because you can catch a touchdown or any of those things, but can you play special teams? Are you willing to do those things that need to get done on a regular basis to be on that roster? Does Joe DeCamillis, the special teams coach, go to Sean McVay and say, listen, if you're up in the air on these two guys, if they're dead even in your mind, give me player A. He's better with me than the other guy is by, an inch or two. That guy's going to make the team. So that's certainly something for Jacob Harris to keep in mind as he gets ready for that one. Another position that I think that there's going to be a lot of competition for is safety. And this brings us to Jordan Fuller, right? Terrell Burgess. Jordan Fuller is fine. I'm getting my draft picks from a couple of years ago mixed up. Terrell Burgess with Jordan Fuller is the guy taken later in the draft. And then by the time turn around, he's starting for the Rams at some point. Burgess is probably going to make the team. He's very likely to make the team, but he didn't look very good, right, in game one. He was involved in that broken coverage that resulted in that long Charger pass. He also is out there with a uniform on, which is not a good sign. Think about who's not playing, right? You've got Taylor Rapp not playing, Jordan Fuller not playing, Nick Scott not playing. These are safeties, and with the Rams, the last thing you want to have to do is go out on that field during the preseason and show what you've got because it means they're not quite sure. And Terrell Burgess is that guy. I would be surprised if he didn't make the team, but I wouldn't be stunned, right? He needs to play better to kind of just say, hey, listen, I can be your depth guy. I can do some other things for you. He has been inconsistent, to be charitable, his first couple of years in the league. So why don't we make sure that you go out there and have a pretty good day to cement your roster spot right there alongside the rest of those guys that I just mentioned. And then finally, you know what the offensive line is going to look like, right? You've got, we'll go right from left. You've got Rob Havenstein is your right tackle. You go to the right guard, it's going to be Coleman Shelton. You got Brian Allen as your center. You go to Edwards as your left guard. And then you've got, of course, Joe Noteboom as your left tackle. Those are your 5 guys. And then you start going depth. You've got Logan Bruss, who's your first draft pick. He's certainly going to be a part of what you do. And now you're into that spot where you're trying to figure out who's going to come next. Is it Tremaine Ankrum? Or is it Bobby Evans? So Bobby Evans was not particularly dynamic in that first game. He was just one of those guys that you're going to want to make sure has a good game. Because if all of a sudden you are giving up hits on Perkins, or you're giving up hits on Wolford, or you're getting beat regularly, and again, by guys that are probably not going to be starters in the NFL and are probably maybe not even going to be NFL players, and you want to be Rob Havenstein's backup, and you want to be, potentially a guy that you could go to the left in a pinch if you need to do it, you should probably be ready to find that out. This is not somebody that's going to happen. AJ Arcuri is another player that's out there that's been pretty well regarded through the first part of the preseason. So Bobby Evans could have his work cut out for him as well. All right, excited for that second preseason game of the year coming up on Friday. It's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rams. Thanks for making us your first listen today. Now make Locked On Fantasy Football your second listen. Find the intellectual fantasy expert Vinny Eiler, who brings over 20 years of NFL experience and unique angles to give you the moves no one else has. Get ready for your fantasy draft with Locked On Fantasy Football. Till next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.